If you are a divorced woman dating and you have questions about when do I introduce my kids to my new partner? What do I say on a date? How do I know I can trust again? Then tune into this episode where you will hear the answers to those questions and maybe even a couple of personal stories of my own. Are you a divorced woman who's in the dating world? And do you have questions about how to navigate all the challenges? Well, if so, today's episode is for you. I am always open to questions and comments about each episode. And I received a few questions since the last recording, and I'm going to share them, of course, changing some names and identifying details with you today. And my guess is that you're going to relate to them. So I've got 3 major questions we're going to dive into. Let's get started. The first one, we'll call her Julie. Julie is a woman who was married for 15-ish years, and she says that her husband was somebody who lied often, who cheated on her. The first time she found out via text, reading a text on his phone, and confronted him, and they did some therapy, and she always had her guard up. She wasn't sure she could trust him, only to find out that he continued on with this woman, and he later told her that he loved her. She was an old girlfriend, I think, from high school that he connected with on Facebook, which is unfortunately a pretty common story these days. So her question, based on her experience, is how do you know if you can trust somebody again? And this is such a common and understandable question. How do you know? Do you really know if you can ever trust anybody? So I've got a couple of thoughts about that. So Julie, thank you for your question. And what I would say is that you really don't. Unfortunately, you really don't know if you can trust somebody right away. What's more important than trusting somebody, though, is trusting yourself. And how do you know if you can trust yourself? Well, Stacey, I chose my last partner, and you know how that turned out. So how do I know that this partner, this potential date and turning into a relationship maybe, is not going to do the same thing? Well, you don't. But what you can do is do this differently than you did the first time. First of all, you're not the same age that you were when you met your ex. You have way more life experience. And Julie had also mentioned that she has 2 children. So she's a mom. And so we have, as women, I think, a sixth sense, that women's intuition, they call it, right? And so if we're in tune with it, if we stop and take the time to really listen to our gut, I believe we have our own answers. I really do. So I think that taking very small steps, taking your time with a new person that you meet when you're on a first date, noticing, does this person make a promise, and do they keep that promise? And do they say they're going to do such and such, and they've done that? Or is this person making up what seems like excuses or reasons to avoid or lie or gaslight, manipulate? People will show you who they are in the first 5 minutes of meeting them, of speaking to them on the phone, if you are tuned into it. So I would say working on trusting yourself, certainly taking things very slow, looking for consistency from this other person. They make a promise, they keep that promise, etc. And remember Maya Angelou's famous quote, when people show you who they are, believe them. Let's please not fall into this trap of, well, he was just having a bad day, or, he could change. I'll help him to grow and evolve. I'll encourage him to read some self-help books or listen to podcasts or get into therapy. Yes, you can encourage and try to influence, but you are never going to change somebody else, especially if they don't want to be changed. And it's not your job. It's their job to change themselves if they want to. So I wish you luck, Julie, in the dating world. And I want to say that I really think the work is trusting that inner voice and really, like, if something doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. So thank you for your question. The second question, we're going to move on to somebody, I'll call her Rachel. And her question was, well, let me tell you a little bit about her before we get to her question. She is somebody who has 3 children. They're young. She was divorced maybe a year ago after being married for about 12 years. And she's dating. She's in the dating world. She's on the apps and she's meeting some nice men. But one in particular stands out to her. And I think she said she's dating him maybe about 3 or 4 months. And she wants to introduce him to her children. And so this is always a big thing. This is not, when we are divorced and have children, we are not dating like we did in our 20s. Obviously, it's a completely different world with the internet and texting and apps and social media and all of that. But also, too, you have children. And so it's not just about you. It's like you're a package deal, right? And he may be a package deal, too. And I'm talking in heterosexual terms, but this applies to regardless of whether you're straight, gay, whatever. So when do you introduce this new person in your life to your kids? Well, I think you need to know, is this relationship an exclusive, committed relationship? Do you see yourself really staying with this person and going the long distance? That doesn't mean forever. It doesn't even mean marriage. It just means, can you see yourself being with this person for years to come? If so, great. And if not, maybe pause a little bit. I think at least 6 months of a relationship, if not a little bit longer, maybe even a year, although some of you might say that feels like too long a time, but I would say even a year of dating somebody, then introducing them to your kids, especially if your kids are young. And by the way, if you're not divorced and you lost your spouse because they died, or this person that you're dating is a widow or a widower, that throws a little bit of a twist into things. So to you, Rachel, I would say the relationship with this new partner must be serious. And by the way, do you want to meet his children? You had mentioned in the email that he has kids also. His kids are a little bit older. So the dynamics in every family are different. The dynamics in every divorce situation are different, and in every parenting situation are different. So there's a lot to be discussed and addressed in your new relationship. And I think give yourself 6 months, 9 months, a year before you would introduce somebody. I can share with you that I really think I made the mistake, and I certainly learned from it, of introducing a man that I was dating too soon to my kids when I was divorced. I don't think they were ready for it. And quite frankly, I didn't know where that relationship was going. So it's something, if I could turn the clock back, I would do differently. But I am proud to say that I learned a lot from the experience. And I think that's all we can do. So I hope that answers your question, Rachel. So we first had Julie's question of how do you know if you can trust somebody? And that's, again, learning to trust yourself, taking things slowly, and looking for consistent action, that the words match the action. As a matter of fact, pay more attention to somebody's behavior than to their words. Then we had Rachel's question of how do you know when to introduce your children to your new partner? And I think that's got to be a very open dialogue between you and your new partner. And by the way, what I would add is talk to your kids about it. Are they open? Like, especially if they're over a certain age, if they're, let's say 13 or above, you could ask them like, how do you feel about me dating somebody else? And how would you feel about me introducing you? 13 might even be a little young to ask them, but maybe older, 15, 16, and certainly, adult children. Do you want to meet the person in my life now? Because life does move on after divorce, right? It certainly does. So those are some thoughts about When do you introduce your new partner to your kids, and when do you meet their kids? The third question I got from somebody I'll call Mary is, do you talk about, she asked, do I talk about my ex on a first date? Mary came out of a very abusive marriage. Her ex-husband was an alcoholic, and there was some physical violence and abuse. I think she had mentioned there was a restraining order at one point, but there was certainly emotional abuse, narcissistic abuse, gaslighting, manipulation, lies. So not a safe relationship. The result of that is the trauma that is left behind. So Mary shared with me in her email that she has done a lot of work on herself, and kudos to her for that. She's been in some group therapy. She's done some individual therapy, and it's been maybe, I think she said 4 or 5 years since her divorce. She was married for a while. But just now finding the courage, because I do think it takes courage to get back into the dating world. It can be scary. So she's finding the courage, and she wants to know, do I tell this new person who's sitting in front of me at a restaurant about my ex and why my marriage ended, or is it not time yet? And I would say it depends. And I'm going to tell you a funny story in a moment about my own experience on a date. Well, 2 of them come to mind. But in any case, what I would say is that I think it's important to know why somebody's marriage ended, that you can share the bottom line. I didn't trust him at the end, or there was abuse, or I didn't feel safe. I wasn't happy. Something, a sentence, 2 sentences, maybe a paragraph you can share. But when we're on a first date with somebody or newly dating somebody, and the conversation quickly goes to, my ex is an asshole and your ex is this is not good, right? This is not good. And then you're off and running, and it can turn into a really bad therapy session over dinner instead of sharing and learning and getting to know the person in front of you, and you letting them get to know who you are. The 2 stories in my own dating journey. So one date I had, I remember it was a Friday afternoon. It was about 3:00, which is a strange time for a date as I saw it. It wasn't really lunch. It wasn't really dinner, but that's for some reason what I had in my schedule and he had in his. So we meet at this great restaurant in town, and conversation is going well. I think it's nice, and he seems like a really nice man. And at one point he asks me, so tell me a little bit about your ex-husband. What's he like? And I literally, this is a true story, I look up and my ex-husband is walking into the same restaurant, well, on a date also, on a Friday at 3:00. And I said, well, you can ask him because he's right behind you. So we laugh about it today. We had some small talk, said, hi, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? Well, I'm on a date. I'm on a date too. Have fun. So that was the one story. And then, interestingly enough, it was the same restaurant. It's my favorite restaurant, but that aside, I was on a different date. Well, I was in a relationship with somebody at the time, and we were sitting at the bar having dinner, and I look across the bar, and who's sitting on the other side but my ex-husband on a date also. So he had come over and said hello, and it was fine. Not everybody's situation is like that. And by the way, my situation was not like that for a long time. Now he and I are very amicable, and it's wonderful. So, but it certainly took time and work to get to that place. So the point is, you don't want to talk about your ex ad nauseum. It's not healthy for you to get into it in that space. I'm not sure that it's appropriate. And I don't even know that the person sitting in front of you really wants to hear so much about your ex. So I would say if you're going to say anything, Mary, keep it short and sweet, really short and sweet. So that's really what we're talking about today here. There are so many questions that we women have as we go through the dating journey, and it is a journey. And I really am such a fan of saying that taking something about every date you have, every relationship you have, and asking yourself, what's the lesson in this for me? What can I walk away with? That it's such a gift, because that's where the growth comes from. If we don't learn, what a waste, what a shame, I think. So asking yourself, what have you learned along the way? So again, working on trusting yourself. Slow and steady wins the race, right? When do you introduce somebody to your kids? When the relationship is a committed, exclusive relationship, you've been with this person for a long time, you see a future, there is trust now, and hopefully your kids are open to meeting this person. And do you talk about your ex on a first date? Very short, very sweet, if at all. And unless your ex happens to walk into the restaurant, and then they can have their own conversation if they like. So I am open to all of your questions and comments. Please feel free to reach out to me with any of them. Stacey at staceyrose.com, STACEY at STACEYROSE.com. Feel free to reach out, and I'll be happy to answer questions on future episodes as well. And I'm open to hearing about what topics you would like to hear more about too on future episodes. So I thank you for joining. But before we go, I'm going to offer you a journal prompt, because I think that writing after we hear something can be a deepening of our learning experience. So today's prompt is for you to ask yourself, if I was at peace and feeling like the best version of myself, how would I show up on a date? If I were confident about who I am in my own healing journey post-divorce, what version of myself am I bringing to this date? Am I relaxed? Am I authentic? Am I stuck in major anxiety? And if so, how do I get through that? So what does the best version of yourself look like? But again, the prompt is to write about, if I was at peace and the best version of myself, how do I want to show up on a date? Who do I want to bring? Meaning, what version of me do I want to bring? So I thank you for tuning in today. And I want you to remember, you are divorced. You are not done. Your story will continue. Take care. Thanks for hanging out with me on Divorced Women Dating. Dating after divorce is definitely an adventure. And honestly, it is way more fun when we do it together. Hit subscribe so you don't miss a single moment of the helpful, hopeful, or just really relatable episodes. See you soon.